Hello and welcome. This is going to be a quick demonstration of API-led integration using Mulesoft to interact with Reltio. So Mulesoft invites you as a best practice to take a particular approach when designing your APIs. Breaks them down into three different categories really. Lower level system APIs, where APIs are interacting in various conditional ways with the different point solutions from which data needs to be retrieved. Then process APIs are typically stitching these things together in fairly complex, what are known as orchestrations, so as to then deliver the appropriate business value to whoever or whatever are requesting these data. So that last category are really the experience APIs. Reltio and Mulesoft have a strong partnership, and what that means is we've been able to put in place a Reltio connector with a number of different API calls into Reltio as part of the Mulesoft set of connectors available that include some of the more frequently used API calls into Reltio. So today what I want to talk about is a Get Customer API, which is going to leverage a number of different specific APIs that Reltio, among the many APIs that Reltio makes available. Specifically here we're going to query Reltio using exact ID. We're going to do a query using exact or fuzzy attribute equality, and if those fail we're going to try to use Reltio's match rules API to apply matching rules to see if we can find the customer in question. And this is to really take into account the different contexts in which an application is going to potentially need to find its customer in the Reltio. So for example, a gas customer may have the gas customer ID. The electricity customer system may have the electricity customer's ID, but they won't know the gas customer's ID. Lastly, if we're in Salesforce and we potentially don't know either of those things, or if we're in a customer service position and a customer is calling in, then we're going to want to take the fragments of information that the customer shares with us about what their name is, what their address is, what their email address and phone number are, and we're going to want to be able to leverage this reusable way of interacting with Reltio. So that's what this demonstration is all about. So in Mulesoft, this is what my Get Customer Reltio API looks like. We start off with a request of information from the calling application, whatever it happens to have available, and then we're going to go through a decision process. We're going to see whether we have the ID from the source system, and if we do, we're going to do get entity by crosswork. This is a very specific Reltio API call, and if we're successful there, we're just simply going to send the data that we find back. However, if we didn't have those data, we're going to take the customer name, address, other kinds of informational fragments, and we're going to do a query in Reltio to see what we can find. Depending on the outcome, we'll decide whether we found something, i.e. if we did, we're going to send the data back. If we didn't find something, we're going to try one last ditch attempt, and that's to use Reltio's matching API and see if we can find what we're looking for, and we'll send the results back regardless of what we find. And so on behalf of the different requests for information that any of these connected applications might be making, I'm going to simulate that by using a development tool called Postman, where we'll see me preparing some data, and I'll be posting those into this Mulesoft Get Customer API, and it will then be brokering a number of requests, as we just saw in those various pathways with Reltio, so that ultimately we'll find what we can find in Reltio and get it back to the requesting application. So now here we are in the Mulesoft development environment, and you can see how these different Reltio specific API calls that have come as a result of the Reltio connector being available to us with these different typical API calls have been dragged and dropped into their appropriate places in these flows, and then have been configured in a consistent and in some cases reusable way. Here we've got a definition for the connection into Reltio with the credentials and where in the Reltio cloud this particular tenant that we want to talk to exists, and that has been reused in multiple places throughout this particular Mulesoft API. Let's switch to Postman. So here I am in Postman. On the left hand side you can see that I'm simulating the fact that I am the electricity billing system, and I believe I have a customer with this ID, and I want to go to Reltio and get everything that is known about this customer back. So I send that payload in. Mulesoft then comes back and states that a customer, in this case AD McGarren, can be found. She can be found at this address. She has a phone number that looks like this, an email address that looks like this, various other attributes that describe her or identify her. And as I scroll down, that details the accounts that she has. So here you can see that despite the fact that I'm the electricity billing system querying for my customer with this ID, I discover that Reltio has merged together a couple of different customer records here, one of whom is a gas residential customer with this account number. And if I shrink this down, we also see that here's the electric account that is a residential account, which is the one I was originally looking for. But with this response that comes back here, I'm now equipped to take into account, if I am able, to take into account the fact that she is a customer of both of the utilities here, the electric and the gas. Now I'm going to send a query in on behalf of the gas billing system. So the gas billing application believes it has a customer with this particular identifier. I've sent those into Reltio, and the response is identical that's come back. So regardless of the angle that I'm taking, Reltio knows that on behalf of the gas billing, the electricity billing, with those respective IDs, it can pull me back the same customer. So previously we had queried using exact IDs. In the absence of those, a calling application, maybe it's customer service, maybe it's Salesforce that's seeking to search in Reltio before blindly creating a new customer record, is going to use whatever pieces of information are available to it. And here you can see a subset of email address, first name, last name. We send those into Reltio, and what we'll discover here is, in fact, and you can probably predict this, that I found an exact match to AD. I found an exact match to McGarrahan, and if I shrink down the physical address and the phone number, there's an exact match to this data fragment here that represents her email address. So this is our same customer record coming back one more time, but having been found using a different mechanism and therefore using a different API call into Reltio. Finally, we see here a payload coming from the source application. Maybe this is that customer service portal, and I misheard how AD was spelling her name, and so I've got her first name and her last name mixed up, but I do have this email address here. I'm going to query in Reltio one more time. This time you'll see a very subtle change in the way that the data have come back, and this is referring to a particular match rule. So having failed on the first two pathways of querying in Reltio, we're now taking a final route to looking for the data, and of course you can see where this is going. I found a customer who can be identified as AD as well as Adele, and her last name consistently is McGarrahan. And of course these are not identical to the inbound data, but using fuzzy capabilities that were exposed using Reltio's matching engine, I was able to leverage that API and still find this same customer and deliver back this information or any subset that's relevant to the calling application or user so that they can make use of it. So I hope this was useful in really showing you the reusability of a single API that you can construct inside of your Mulesoft environment, but will then do a fairly, in this case, simple sequence of attempting to find the customer that you're looking for inside of Reltio using different Reltio APIs, but all called in a very consistent way here. Thanks very much for watching.